Hello, this is Scott Jentz. Welcome to Sandbox Stories. Hello, welcome to this Sandbox Story, which is an interview with Dr. Alan Glazier. He's the founder of FluoreSCENE Publishing, which is the home to its flagship Odies on Facebook, of which Dr. Glazier is also the founder, as well as other social platforms. We'll discuss his history as an eye care practice owner, his role in private equity consolidation in the market, and his expertise across the industry. Dr. Glazier, welcome to Sandbox Stories.
Scott, thank you so much for having me on what is my favorite podcast.
I appreciate that. And you've got some great ones yourself. Everybody, make sure to check out the FluoreSCENE suite of offerings. They're fantastic.
Thank you.
I usually start Sandbox Stories conversations with a dive into my guest's early life, but we're going to get there. I want to talk about you today. I've seen that you started using a metal detector and doing searches for artifacts. How did you become interested in that?
That's a great question. Yeah, real old guy hobby, right? I had to decide whether I was going to tell people about this hobby. Actually, no, it happened in COVID. Where in COVID, fortunately for me, Odies on Facebook became the place that everyone coalesced to keep their ear to the ground and talk about how they were going to survive and thrive. And I was on there, a good 18 hours a day, making sure that things were civil and and it was productive and not destructive. And it was very stressful, very challenging. And I guess just after COVID, I got so tired of being on the computer and staring at the screen, and including the Zoom meetings and the Zoom calls. I just needed to get out. So I started hiking trails. I live in the Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C., along the Potomac River. It's a beautiful things here I've just never done or seen. And the on-trail hiking led to off-trail hiking because it wasn't as challenging, and kind of rock climbing. And then the off-trail hiking, I started making some discoveries, like old structures that from 200-300 years ago in the woods that were like fascinating and beautiful, some of them. And then it hit me, as a kid. I think I had a dream of having a metal detector one day. I don't remember exactly. It wasn't that prominent a dream for me, but I'm like, I can afford one now. Let me go get a metal detector, and when I'm out there, try it out. And it took a while to get good at it, but now I'm finding some really cool historical stuff. And I'm not the guy looking for quarters and nickels and rings on the beach. I'm really trying to find interesting permissions. For instance, Friday I get to go to this really, really historical property on the Potomac River where there was a Civil War battle, where there was a Revolutionary War battle there. The people who own it know the different parts of their farm, and it's only been metal detected once, like 30 years ago. So it's exciting to me. It's something to look forward to, and it's that whole discovery process that brings out that little kid in you also as well.
I love that. What was the most interesting thing you found so far?
So I found a penny it's called a large cent, and the design was minted 1795 to like or 1799 or something, but the date is rubbed off. But I mean, just finding that in the middle of nowhere was unbelievable, because when you do this, you also watch like YouTubers who are doing this professionally or doing a really good job at it, and they're always finding stuff like this. I'm like, how come I can't find it? And I found it. I'm like, yes. I felt like I was a member of the club then.
No, I mean that sense of discovery is tells me a lot about you, because we will find out more about how you've done that your whole life.
Thanks.
I also want to ask you about your family and your home. Right, you've got an incredible wife and kids, and your dog T-Bone. Tell us a little bit about all that.
So I've been married to my wife. This May next month is our 25th wedding anniversary, and we live in Rockville, Maryland. We have two kids, two boys, college age, a senior at Maryland who's going to graduate in a couple weeks, and then a junior who's living the life over in Barcelona on a semester abroad, who attends Syracuse. And just great kids. I couldn't ask for better sons and a better wife. And it's just things are copacetic and good. It's great to be able to say that, because it's not always easy. And there you're always is the patriarch. You're always trying to keep things together, but they've got a mother that does most of that.
What kind of a dog is T-Bone?
Oh, T-Bone, my goodness, how could I forget my favorite child? Um, he's a golden doodle, He's 13, but he's in. He went through a few health bumps, but we got him past them, and he's very energetic for a 13-year-old dog. You'd be surprised.
Interesting. Let's go back to your early days now. You're originally from Silver Spring, Maryland.
Yeah, right
What
outside.
was that like?
It's
Small town, big town?
so it's a suburb of DC. It's not quite suburban and it's not quite urban. It's kind of in between. So it's still very much concrete jungle, but patches of earth and trees here and there. It's about 5 miles outside of Washington D.C., the line of Southeast DC. So it can be a rough area, although I made it through okay. Very middle class where I grew up. And, yeah, great memories from there as well.
Were you into sports, school,
I was
arts? What did you find pleased you as a kid?
I was always into sports. I thought I was a lot better than I was, so I tried out for every team. I made, 2 teams, but it didn't last. But I enjoy playing sports. I enjoy watching sports. My mojo for watching them has died out over the years. I'm a gym rat. I love hitting tennis balls, hitting balls, and baseball was my number one for a long, long time. And big Redskin fan my whole life. My family's had season tickets since the very first season, like 1935. Passed down grandfather to father to me to my kids. So it's kind of a legacy in the house.
And you had a heck of a head of hair back then, didn't you?
I had the best hair, Scott. I don't know about you, but I had the best thick,
I
black,
never
kind of wavy, curly hair, not the tight curls, and it was black. And if you saw a picture, you wouldn't believe it. I miss it terribly.
I think I've seen one, that's the only reason I bring it up, but
That's okay. Now flesh colored hair is fine.
I'm with
it's
you.
a first world problem.
So your dad was an optometrist. He was president of the Maryland Optometric Association, president of your state board. Obviously, he drove some of your interest in the profession?
Y- You know, yes. I mean, it has to be that way. My path was I wanted to be a vascular surgeon.
Hmm.
But then I didn't. Then I wasn't sure I wanted to be one because I was talking to people, and it turns out you're like not till you're 35 till you start really making money or can have a practice. And I lived at home for a year while I tried to sort out what I was going to do. And I during that time, for the first time, I observed my father cognizantly trying to figure out things. And he come home from work so happy every day. Ultimately, with optometry, you can save lives. You can't save one every day like you could with vascular surgery. You save eyes every day. And I decided that if I could come home half as happy as he did from work, this could be a really good healthcare profession. Plus, I was going to be 27 when I got out. So, and making a decent living for a single guy. So it turned out to be a good choice for me. It definitely was. I worked in his office, so I knew my way around the field, and it was definitely a good choice for me.
So you went to the New England College of Optometry, graduating in 93, and then you got into practice early with your dad?
When I came out of school, I didn't know this about myself, but I'm quite a hard worker and entrepreneur, and I had a ton of jobs. I was working 7 days a week, partly because that first paycheck I got, which had four figures on it, I had never had a paycheck like that in my life, and I couldn't stop staring at it. All of a sudden, like I'm gonna get mugged. I'm mugged in my whole life, and like I'm hiding this check, figuring out when I can get it to the bank. So I liked earning money a lot. I He had a solo VT practice where it was him and my mom was the office manager, and I came in there 1 or 2 days a week and gave him his first Saturday off in his whole career. And my mom was always said he was really proud about that. And I started my own practice in a ophthalmologist office where when he was gone 2 days a week in surgery. And I built that up and that was doing really well. And then I worked at a lens crafters, I worked locum tenens, I worked a couple other places and on and off. And then in 95, my father passed away suddenly without any warning. It's in his sleep at age 60. And I was 29 and I had to make the decision, was I going to take over his practice or keep my practice going or could I do them both? And I didn't have the business acumen then to do them both or the time. So I decided that I had to. By the way, if you have a parent who has a practice, usually it's not given to you. You usually have to buy it from them or buy it from their estate in this case. But I got a very fair price. I ended up buying it from his estate, and I tried to merge them together. And 40% of the other practice followed me, which was really helpful. I spent about 2, 3 years just figuring it all out, getting, trying to stand straight, not trying to lose any more money than I was already losing because I was doing dumb things. And by 98, 99, I figured it out, got a better location, and then it's grown from there.
So it took you a little over 5 years. Did you get some of that business acumen from your mom? Did she understand the business of the eye care business that helped you out?
My mom was more like a COO type. She was very organized and kept me organized. But working with your mom after your father passes away is not the easiest thing. She's grieving. She's treating me like a child, and it needed to end. And at a certain point, we had the conversation where, listen, we either have to salvage our personal relationship or our business relationship. And I don't want to say I fired her, but I think we both came to terms with the fact that it wasn't going to work. And I brought in an office manager, and she retired from that. And that's kind of the path that went.
How do you think our fellow ODs get their business acumen over time? You learned it through the school of hard knocks. Frankly, I did too. I ended up partnering with a couple of optometrists that gave me extra speed to my knowledge. But practice management work at colleges of optometry is minimal. Do most of us learn it on the path and the journey as you and I did?
I think that's a great question. I've thought about this before. I think about 2/3, about 66% of optometrists will learn it, and 33% won't or don't want to. The two that learn are there are people like me who are risk takers, and I'll throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And if it doesn't work, I won't cry over spilled milk. I'll just pick myself up and move on to the next thing until I figure out things that work, the trends that makes things work and don't. And then I still make those mistakes in learning process. And being in business is a lifetime of learning and wanting to learn. The second category are people who are good in business, but they spend a lot of time figuring out what they're going to do. They think everything through at the minutia and the detail, and then they make a decision. And I think close to 100% of the time, the odds of that working are just as good as you know people who just kind of go with their gut. And I was always a go with the gutter. But those two kinds of doctors probably have the ability and to learn, continue to learn, and grow their business and get better at business as it goes. And then you have I'm sorry, there's about 10% or less of people who are just brilliant business people who build huge organizations, and it just delegating comes naturally to them, which does for the other two categories, my category and the people who diddle daddle over every little detail. I don't think delegating comes natural to us, but I learned, and that was the most important thing that made me ultimately not only be successful but have the lifestyle alongside of working as well.
You've talked a couple times about your entrepreneurial spirit. Where do you think it came from?
Being short, when
I
when
think
you're
you're half
short,
serious.
it's the I've been people have accused me of having a Napoleon complex before, and I'm not going to deny that to some degree I don't. I've always been driven, because I'm 5'5", so I'm always the shortest guy around. But there's something for some group of people like that were my height or that felt they needed to show that they were bigger in other ways, and that I think to some degree that drove me. I'm more driven. I was never money driven, although you can't totally say money doesn't drive you because money is the metric of how good your business is going. I was the kind of guy who was always trying to grow my practice bigger and bigger. And when I didn't do that, then I felt like a failure, even though it was in no way failing. So I'm always pushing that. Like something inside me is always pushing. I also a big thing about me that drives me is I like to be the first to do something. If I'm not going to be first, I won't do it, and it doesn't interest me anymore. And that's good because it keeps you learning and it keeps you focusing on different things, not maybe first, but early on and stuff like, you know, and that's important to me.
That's interesting because now we're going to talk about you got some recognition in 2011 for your pioneering efforts in social technologies. Where had you developed your original interests in online communities?
If you told me what marketing was back before 1995 when I took over that practice, I would really not have an idea what a marketer would do. I was all science and math all the way through school, and but then when I had a business, I quickly learned how important marketing was, and so I started reading up on it and learning about it. And back then, um, a way to drive patients into your practice was it was the very beginning of search engine optimization, where you could trick Google into getting your listing to place higher on page one for the products and services that you wanted to be found for by patients in the area, potential patients. And so I studied that. I learned how to do it. And then about in 2004-ish, social media came around. And then there became this intersection between social media and search, where search algorithms were using your actions in social media to give you additional juice to drive you up. So I started doing a lot of social media early on, all solely for the purpose of growing my practice. And then I guess it was 2007 or eight. I was having a lot of success with this, and I had written some articles, and Jobson picked up on it, and they gave me a platform at their Vision Monday Summit to get up. And a funny story, it's a long story, but I'll try and break it down. The headliner went right before me. This guy, Mark Gobet, who's this brilliant marketer who he redesigned the Coke can and like became famous for this. And he did his talk, and I'm watching it in horror because it was exactly my talk, exactly, except it was prettier because he had a team of people put together the graphics and everything. And then I got up there, and this is in front of the CEO of Luxottica. This is in front of all the big wigs in the industry. You know who goes to these Vision Monday summits. If you really want to, be around the cream of the crop in our industry, that's one place to do it. And I get up there, and I'm like, in my head, I'm rolling my eyes. I give my talk, and at the end, I get a standing ovation. And I was perplexed. And this is a true story. I'm not exaggerating on it. And afterwards, after everybody came up and said hi and we handed business cards and everything, Mark came up to me, the keynote, and he said, "That was amazing." And I said, "Can I just ask you, you did the exact same thing, and you're you, and I did this, and why did everyone give me so much attention?" And he said to me, he goes, "Because I talked about it, but you did it." And it was a real, I'll never forget that conversation because it really turned things around for me. Later that night, he said, "You should write a book." And I wrote a book. And I kind of, at that point, cemented myself as, back then, this guy who, in small medical business internet marketing. I started to get gigs outside of our industry, but then I decided I didn't want to be like, there's a lot of people fighting to be the guy or gal, all over the internet talking about this thing. I just decided to focus on eye care because when sometimes if you go too broad, you miss your target.
So
So
back in that time, ODs were building communities and conversations and listservs, and there were ways for us to connect through technology. But as you said, social media was really, rapidly growing. And you come up with this idea for a little group called ODs on Facebook. Tell us about how it started.
I was there was those forums were the way that we communicated from the mid '90s up. Remember Walt Neo's forum Optcom list, and it would feed into your inbox, which was really annoying to a degree. But it was great what he did there. He was really the father of optometry social media. And then when there was another group, I don't want to mention any names, but it was a very rough place to engage where the admins really didn't do any adminning. They were actually sometimes part of the problem, and there were a lot of isms that went on in there: sexism, racism, misogyny, things that I love connecting and networking. I can consider myself a connector first, but it just wasn't a great place to engage. So I tolerated it, and I felt marginalized to a degree. The minute you said something, you risked being attacked, which is fine. But who needs that? Who needs to spend their time defending themselves online? It's a waste of time, I felt. So when I found out about the group function in Facebook, I decided on the back of a napkin, I wrote down everything I didn't like about that group. I created the guidelines, and I invited kind of 40 of my thought leader friends, lecturers, to have a really high quality discussion. But what I didn't know is you could invite people. And so I went in, I set it up, I invited 40 people. I didn't know they could invite people. I went into the exam and I came out, there were 120 members and all these comments. "Oh, we need something like this. This is a great idea. I don't really enjoy that other place because and then I was on the hook to make sure that I implemented those guidelines. From then on, it just blew up. And it was the one comment that said it all was a lot of people were like, we really need a safe space to share, they said. And that's kind of been the mission all along, is to keep it safe and keep it transparent and keep it real. Um, and that's kind of the story there.
What is it like today? What is Odie's on Facebook like today? Numbers? Do you feel like, I know you've worked hard to have it also be a place where vendors in the industry can interact with docs? I mean, it's grown. What's it like now?
Yeah. Gosh, what's it like now? It's very after it was crazy when it started for a few years until people understood what I was looking for and what I expected of them. And then they I think they got it, and then COVID hit and it became a nut house. It was absolutely insane. I have stories that would take up
So
four
is
more hours.
society. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so did society, right? It kind of mirrors society. That's a great way to say it. Right now, it's society's in kind of this holding pattern right now. The group is very, very highly engaged. It's very um, people keep their ear to the ground there. We call it optometry's community now. There's a lot of great smaller groups out there that are really subject matter oriented, but we're really the mothership. And I think everybody comes in there and they checks out, and then they go to their other places and they come back, and it's really kind of the epicenter, I think, of all optometry social media. I don't pat myself on the back by saying it. Kind of that's what I hear from people.
Yeah. Now through FluoreSCENE, you have a number of different endeavors. I guess those are natural extensions of this idea that you want to connect ODs online and develop additional offerings. What else does FluoreSCENE offer today?
Thanks for that. Yeah, Andy Morgenstern came up with the name FluoreSCENE. I thought it was great. It's the scene of everything we do, and we had to come up with a name that didn't have the word Facebook in it because there's legal ramifications to that for marketing it and advertising it. And we never got any trouble or anything, but I realized it was we're going to have to change it. And then we had a I've been collecting emails for people who want to get in on our best of newsletter for a long time. So because people, what happens is there'll be a post in there, and then a week or two later, somebody will say, "Hey, what happened to that post about this?" And everybody will say, "Oh, I always miss the good stuff," And we decided to do put a three. It's a newsletter that goes out in the inboxes called the Best of ODs on Facebook, and it has the three best posts of the past week. And it has a huge open rate, 35%. We have 30,000 people subscribe to it, and 35% of them look at it. I'm sorry, 35% open rate on that email, which is really high. And I, I forgot what was the question. Oh yeah. So then when I realized that, and I saw other opportunities to do cool newsletters because in the group people love to talk about retina. So we have a retina newsletter, and we're going to keep spinning out stuff as people need it. And then falls under the umbrella, and all of a sudden I have these assets, and we're getting advertisers. It just kind of happened that way.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks.
Let's talk a little bit about what I'll call your inventiveness. You explained to me that you've been issued 7 patents, that you invented the first accommodating IOL that didn't depend on the action of the ciliary muscle. How did all this come to be? Again, you said you want to be first at things, but wow.
Yeah. I think one of my superpower is if you give me a problem that exists in an area of unmet need that I have some expertise in, of course, or knowledge or education and time, I'll come up with some kind of out of the box solution. It may not be the best, but it'll be something different. And I always liked thinking that like that. My brain worked that way. So I've always trying to solve problems ever since the first patent, which was for the magnifying contact lens storage unit. So you have your little foil pack there. I'm a hyperope, but I was in my 30s at this time. But I realized that when I was older, if I had my glasses on and I try and put the lens on your finger, it would be really difficult. So the the packs then had the well and a plastic flange, and nothing was going on in flange. So I wrote a patent on a magnifier in the flange, so you could put the contact on your thing and on your finger, and then look at it with the magnifier. And it was just a solution that I was looking for presbyopic solutions mostly. And then I came up with this idea for we call it the liquid lens, which was the first accommodating intraocular lens that did not depend on the action of the ciliary muscle. And I put a company around that, raised over $2 million, and we almost got to market in Europe, and the funding dried up. And we tried, and it was the market shifted from investing in certain areas of healthcare to investing in cardiology and other areas, and you couldn't raise ophthalmology money, and I couldn't keep it going enough to pay for the patents. There were like 4 or 5 patents that were costing like 20 grand a year with all the international filings and everything. So it was just too much. But it worked, which is a shame. You think about all those great ideas out there that could have helped humanity that worked, but just could not, from a business perspective, get to market. But it was a great lesson. I dealt at the highest levels in ophthalmology. I was at all the big ophthalmology meetings. My board of directors were the top ophthalmologists. A couple of them were investors. It was a really great learning lesson. But it was a failure as a business. So I took that into other things as well, and yeah, I just have fun doing it. I'm not going to do that anymore. It's a money pit. And at my age, I still come up with ideas. And I'd love to pursue that, but I know what's involved now, and it's not for the faint of heart, as you know. And you
It
know.
isn't. And And I think that there's a lot of people that post on, say, LinkedIn, quotes from people that talk about, failure is necessary for success. I don't have those things memorized. I read them. But back to your comment about how your presentation at Vision Expo Summit was received, the difference between the people that talk about it and you is that you did it. I failed too, and I'm not talking about that because I'm looking for some sort of recognition for it. You aren't saying it for that reason either. But you can't find paths to success unless you make a genuine effort and know there's a possibility that even with raising money and bringing a lot of people on the ride, that it's not going to work. I think that must create a lot of sort of self awareness and humility, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and I think people who have a huge ego, would have a harder time doing it because if I fail, I'm like I can deal with it. I'm like, oh well, I would like to succeed on to the next thing. Like, but some people that failure will just devastate them and poison them from moving forward in other directions, and you can't let that be the case.
Yeah. I know you're passionate about your support of the New England College of Optometry. You were pleased to be the commencement speaker there in 2019, and that one of your proudest moments was receiving their presidential medal. Why do you care about your alma mater so much?
Hmm. Can I get some NECO love? Anyone out there? Put your NECO love fingers up for me. Um, I had a long time where I wasn't involved with the school, so I can't tell you that it was done. Like I have this amazing, tremendous passion for my school. Um, I lost touch with them for a long time, and then um, I probably they gave me the biggest award, the most meaningful award of my life at the time when they asked me to be commencement speaker and gave me a presidential medal. And it was at that moment that I realized, wow, this is a special institution. Even though I never took the time to really think about it before, I wish I had been more involved as an alumni. And so I think this is a lot of this is making up for lost time. And as and being on the board of trustees now, I see the passion of the people who work there and the efforts, the amazing effort that Howard Purcell puts into running the school as president and just everyone there is so it's such a there's such a part of it that I feel like now that I am too, and that kind of has built that passion as well. But I'll tell you, Scott, you can look for a lot of achievements in your life. You can strive for a lot of things. There's a lot of things that you have there a path to, like getting an OD, but nobody can say I want to be a commencement speaker someday. Like that's not your choice. You can't like lobby for that really, and so the fact that it was just chosen for me blew me away. And really, that's the reason why I continued with the school and continue. I set up a scholarship and continue to help them raise money as chair of the development committee. So anybody out there who's looking for a great cause and wants to contribute to NECO, talk to me. Thank you for that.
And they should, because your story, I think, is the common story. It models mine. I'm passionate about my college, Illinois College of Optometry. I'm involved like you are now, and I was silent for many years. And now you and I both know, being on boards with them, that the graduates leave. They kind of take the conferring of the degree as a representation of their hard work, forgetting how much hard work is there, and that the people at the college have never stopped caring about the profession and the students day in and day out, and all those times where we stopped paying attention. And I really am glad you said that, because that to me is the reminder that I should have gotten a lot earlier about why it's important to continue to find some manner to support your alma mater.
Yeah, it's for some people, it's not for others, and it happens at different times in our lives. And I'll tell you, I've always, through what I've done, I know these on Facebook, supported students on my own dime, traveling to schools to give a presentation about what practicing is like. I did that for many years up until COVID, and but I can have such an impact on them by working with these bright people on the board of trustees to make their experience in school a better one and make them better clinicians through the initiatives at the school. That it's kind of like what I was doing before on steroids.
Do you have a sense, as a member of the board of trustees at one of the most preeminent optometry colleges, that there is hope for the future of the profession by these young people who are attending optometry school today? Are they the bright next, future of the profession, or do you have concern?
Um, I have no concern about the school or the students and the future of optometry at all. Um, I do have concern about the number of schools and the board scores for the future of optometry, because I've seen that impact the profession negatively firsthand. Not at NECO specifically, I mean across the board.
Yeah.
Um, I think a healthcare profession, no matter whether it's I just wrote this online the other day, whether it's optometry or dental or podiatry or medicine, you're going to go into it and you're either going to be a glasses half full person or a glasses half empty. If you're a glasses half full person, you're going to make the best you can of your degree and be successful and find ways to to uh, to have a career within it that makes you happy. If you're a glasses half empty person, it's not optometry. Any of those healthcare verticals you went into, you were going to be negative on it to some degree, and that's just kind of how it works. So I think the future is bright. I see more and more young ODs in the past 2 years opening up independent practices than I have in a long time, and that bodes well. And I understand how the cycles of an economy can make it look like, the henny penny sky is falling situation. But listen, we lived through Y2K, right? The sky
Yep.
is not falling. Things shift and change, and they're going to have the people that graduate now are going to have a different path than I did, but they're going to make it their own, like I did. That's kind of the, if your glass is half full, that'll happen.
Yeah, I tend to agree. You sold your practice to private equity in 2018 and then started doing business development work for Kepler for a few years. What is the net positive impact you've seen from the inside of this consolidation of optometry practices?
It's the net positive impact. So I don't see anything negative with private equity. I'm one of those people who never did. I think you build your practice with primarily for your future and the future of your family. And when it comes time to sell, you need to sell not for the benefit of the profession. You need to sell for your own personal benefit first, and maybe second or third, take into account what your one practice sale is going to influence the whole profession. Because the profession's going nowhere. I talk about this analogy about an apple tree where, the practices like mine that were very large when they got bought were like the ripe apples, and on that tree though remain the green apples, the 500 to $800,000 practices that were going to be red apples someday, and they weren't getting picked up or bought, or a lot of them were choosing not to. Like when my practice was that size, I got offers to buy it. I didn't sell it, I grew it. And then you have, unfortunately, your rotten apples, which are like asset purchases. They have no real value because the optometrists really didn't take care of their profits. And that's a cycle that goes on and on and on, whether PE comes in or out. We're in the third cycle of PE, and it hasn't destroyed independent optometry. The model with Kepler, what I liked about it, well, and of course, though, there was another organization out there that wanted to buy my practice. It wasn't a good fit for my patients because it was very retail oriented, and we were very medical model. And I could have sold to them. It would have been very disruptive. I opted to go with Kepler as an option because they were promising something just a little different. They weren't telling anyone it wasn't a private equity deal, but they weren't co-branding. They weren't coming in and changing your EMR right away. They weren't changing your staff. They sat back and watched what worked, what didn't work, started to make changes gradually, tried to keep the staff that was operating well. And to this day, I would say most of my patients don't even know I sold. And I'm in there seeing patients, they don't have any idea because it looks and feels, it's the same brand, it's the same local business. And I like that they did that. So it was a good fit for me. But does that answer the question?
It does, because I think, let me say it this way, let me repeat it back to you to see if we've got this on the same line. I think that the benefit is that sometimes those apple trees, those apples fall on the ground and these practices die. And this invigoration of them, which isn't necessarily going to happen by students coming out and buying the practices, gives optometrists of the future an opportunity to practice. And again, they have to appreciate that model. They have to want to be in that model. They're not independent necessarily, right? They're not making their own decisions, signing the payroll checks, but they're practicing in a pretty independent way. And I think that's generally good.
Yeah, and the consolidation is good for a business like mine. We struggled in the local market in certain ways because of sources that were more consolidated around us, and it was an economy of consolidation for a long time. It's nice to be able to have an opportunity to consolidate with people, like-minded people like me. The people who sold their practices to Kepler were. They were the cream of the crop to a large degree, and they ran practices very similar to mine. And now we're together, and we're with the combined interest of seeing our practices thrive within this organization as opposed to independent as we had been before.
Yeah. So I want to shift back to your personal life. You've got some interesting stories about your family and the time that they were in Israel. Give us a little bit of that.
Oh, well, yeah, not the time they were in Israel, but my family, part of my family, wa
Originated there.
great grandfather had 5 brothers and or 5 siblings, and 3 of them, one went to Boston, immigrated to Boston. They were in Lithuania. Things got rough under the Cossacks there for Jews, and they left. One went, and the parents, to hedge their bets, sent one kid to U.S., one kid to Israel, and one kid to South Africa. It's a common story, by the way. My Israeli relatives founded a town called Metula, which is on the extreme northernmost border of Israel facing Lebanon. So they look out their window and they're looking at Hezbollah right there. And my great uncle was a very famous Israeli soldier. His name was Mordechai Hod, Hod. He was known as Mati, Motti. He was the chief of the Israeli Air Force in the Six-Day War. And one of the ways Israel won that war was he came up with a plan to strafe the Egyptian Air Force before they ever got off the airfield, and basically was credited with winning the war. The Air Force was, and he was the head of the Air Force. And then he went on to become the CEO of El Al. So pretty famous family over there. I'm in touch with my cousins. We reconnected after never meeting in our whole lives when I went over there about 10 years ago. It's funny they look just like me. It's crazy, and they're not even that close cousins. And we all had the same clothes on. We had black t-shirts and jeans, except they were like 6'2". So I have this funny picture of me between these 2 guys that look like me that are taller, and they look like you too. Actually, maybe we all look alike when we lose our hair. But yeah, that's my Israeli story.
And here in the United States, you had an uncle, Bernard Cohen, that did some amazing things. Tell us about him.
Yeah, my uncle Bernie he was a public defender at the Department of Justice in the 1960s, and he was assigned this case called Loving versus the state of Virginia. And some of you may have heard of it. Some of you may have seen the movie that was made about this case. But it was the first interracial marriage in Virginia. Was they were forced to break up and declare the marriage not legal. And he fought the Supreme Court case for this and won. And he became a very very famous from that. He went on to serve in the Virginia legislature. But the movie, I think it's called Loving, Loving, it's such an incredible story of how people were trying to keep 2 people who are in love from being married. And you think about it, it's just insane that this was only 50 years ago, 60 years ago, but he enshrined his name in history by winning that Supreme Court case, which not very few people at the age of, like, I think he was 28 or 29, he approached the Supreme Court and won this case that changed the lives of countless people for the better.
That's fantastic. I know you love live music. You're a huge fan of the band Phish. How did that come to be?
I am a fan of Phish. How did that come to be? Phish. I first time I saw them, I love music, and I'm a huge audiophile. I play a few instruments here and there. I haven't picked it up in a long time, but I just saw them, and it just resonated with me so deeply. They're such passionate musicians. It's a style of music, jam music, that not everybody loves because the songs are very long, but they take you through a whole ride, and I love that. It started with me with the Grateful Dead, and the Grateful Dead were great for me. They just were never all that because there was a lot of solemn, serious music in there. Fish is more light and goofy and just happy party kind of music, and I that was more where I kind of planted my flag.
I love it. I want to talk in optometry about those that have most influenced you. I know you probably would not want to mention names for fear of leaving somebody out, but can you give us a sense of those that come to mind, the people that have impacted your path?
Gosh, so many. The top two, and then as I'm talking, I'm sure more will come to mind. The top two, of course, my father would be the number one, and then Ed Wazlowski, who ran Omni Baltimore, I would say would be number two. For anybody who knows Ed, super great guy. I did my one of my rotations there, and we just clicked. And I learned so much from him, and we became friends, and we stayed friends afterwards. And he really helped. I really wanted to model my clinical career after what he was doing. Although Omni is a very special business, not everybody can be involved in an Omni. So yeah, he was amazing, and I was heavily influenced by some of my teachers at NECO. Uh, Dan Kurtz, who passed away not a few years ago. Loved that guy. He was a OTM theory, optometry theory and method. Nancy Carlson also was part of that, and I really loved and respected her. I had a teacher I hated, absolutely hated, who now when I look back, I realize, oh my God, without that guy, I would have been way worse at what I do, and that was Ernest Lowenstein. He was a tough teacher. I don't think anyone liked him, but he forced me to learn more than anyone else out there. And then on the AOA side, people like Dory Carlson and Barbara Horn, have really influenced me. And I've had a lot of peers who are my peer year who, when we talk, influence me as well. There's just way too many to name, but that's just a few of the many people out there who really influenced me.
In turn, have you used those experiences of people giving you help, guidance, or constructs? Have you now done that for younger ODs?
Yeah. So the great question. When I talked earlier briefly about when I realized, when ODs on Facebook was doing great, and I was kind of in a thought leadership position in the industry, and everybody knew who I was. I really wasn't doing anything to give back, and so I started doing. I built a talk. I called it School of Doc: The Transition from Student Doctor to Real Doctor, because that transition was probably the thing that people are scared of the most and don't understand the most. And it had a lot of cautionary tales and then a lot of business lessons. And I built this and I took it on the road and I went to a lot of schools and I met a lot of the students between the years of 2013 and 2018 when I was on the road doing that. And then COVID, killed that gig. But I would do that on my own dime, and I would buy the students a pizza party and some beer and take them out afterwards and get to know them. And I met so many people through that, and I love doing that. And then I'm trying to build something now, an online portal to do something stuff like that. But I'm working on getting funding, and it's not wallets are very tight right now.
Yeah.
But I think if people could see what I see for this, they would be willing to open their wallets and really build something special for students and get their brand in front of them at the same time. But yeah, that's how I gave back for a long time.
Yeah. All right, we're going to round the corner toward the end of our discussion, and I listed out a few things that I want to remind myself to ask you. And I think these are kind of like higher thinking questions. So let me hit the first one. Is you had mentioned something to me, and we've never talked about it before. You have sort of an emerging theory on presbyopia.
So one of my overly ambitious uh, efforts that almost killed me and took $1 million. I'm not saying $1 million. It wasn't $1 million, but a lot of my time and money and effort over the years was, like I said, I can come up with out of the box solutions to things. I always thought that they got presbyopia wrong. That not totally wrong, but that the root cause of presbyopia and cataracts was not what they say it is. If you ask 10 physicists, 10 PhD, lens scientists, you have 10 of the greatest cataract surgeons, what causes presbyopia cataracts, which anybody worth their salt knows they're part of the same condition. They're just, the transition down the road of the hardening of the inside of the lens. They tell you oxidation. 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 will tell you oxidation. But that change happens it starts happening at a certain point, like around, we don't know exactly, but somewhere around between 20 and 30, maybe around 25, where the lens is fine doing its thing, and all of a sudden that oxidation starts to take hold. So by 42, you're starting to have not be able to accommodate. And I thought if it was normal up to 25, and then all of a sudden the oxidation takes hold, then something has to have changed to enable it to take hold. It couldn't be the root cause. It could be the major cause. It could be a root cause, but there had to be something that happened that enabled that made it so that your lens, what happens is proteins fold and unfold in very healthy ways. They get rid of a lot of the genetic defects that by doing that. And when they do that, when they're open, they're subject to damage from UV. But because they fold in chemical processes real fast, the UV can't get in. But at a certain point, the folding starts to get a little off and be a little broken. And that's when UV hits them. What changes are in the lens? And I spent 25 years trying to solve this problem. I have boxes of notes in my garage. I put them away in 2014 just because I was going out of my skull. And then during COVID, I picked them up again because I didn't have anything to do. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, I think I know what's doing this. And what I believe is doing it is pressure inside the lens, because pressure of certain amounts unfolds and misfolds proteins. And inside the lens, not a lot of people know this, but the pressure in a human lens is around, oh, I forget the numbers, somewhere like around 100 to 200 millimeters of mercury
Hmm.
in a young human lens. And then in an older human lens, it's 600. And there's a linear graph of how much the pressure goes up. When you overlay that over the presbyopia graph, they line up perfectly. So my theory is that the root cause is that the pressure damages proteins that makes them susceptible to the oxygen. And I wrote it up in a paper and I got it published in Clinical Ophthalmology, which was another one of my highlights, like just coming up with that theory and then showing it to important people and them not shooting it down, but them saying, this is really interesting. Now you got to do this, this, and this. I said, I'm done.
So
You're going to do this, this, and this. That's not for me, right? But
that's
yeah.
awesome.
I hope I
All
explained that well. And if you want to look at clinical ophthalmology and type in my name in their search tool, you can find that paper.
all right. All right. Next, I want to talk to you about your views about how an OD should think about interacting with commentary and critiques on review sites.
Oh, that's my favorite topic. That's what I still give a talk called Yelp Help,
Okay.
and I have a kind of a system. I call it CAPC, Caspico, CASPECO. And there's a strategy, because when somebody posts a negative review, it's a very visceral thing because it's your business, it's your pride and joy, your baby, and in some ways they're saying this about you, and that can be really painful to see. But there's either some real grains of truth in there that you really need to pay attention to improve your business, and or they're crazy and maybe they're just, or they have an agenda against you. But either way, how you respond is not to really drive that person or assuage them or bring them back in your practice. They're gone and done. You don't even want them back. But that's only one person. You're going to have hundreds or thousands of people that read that review. Those are the people that you need to convince that what that person wrote is not an accurate reflection of your business. So how you respond has to be very strategic. And Caspico, it's a, it's CASPE and CO are the uh, the strategy whereby you apologize because you want to sound magnanimous to the people reading it, not to that person. It's sorry this happened to you, and then you want to make an effort to change. That's the E. You say, we're having an office meeting about this, and we're going to change our policies so this never happens to anyone else. And then you use SP as social proof. You say, by the way, and if they give you 1 star or something, you say, by the way, as you can see from the 200 5-star reviews we have, because that's social proofing. You're saying to that person, what's wrong with you when 500 people or 200 people gave us a gold star, 5 gold stars? And that also points out to the reader, like, yeah, this is an anomaly, and the subconsciously. And then the C is make them look crazy. Like you can say something like, I remember the first review I ever got, the person said, they wouldn't take my insurance and didn't offer me any cash paying options. And as I read it and I thought about it, I'm like, wait a second, this person was never even in my office. So I mentioned in there, had you ever come into our office? So that people reading it would say, oh yeah, like that person was never in here. And then, and if you put it together right, you can turn those lemons into lemonade. And there's a video on YouTube about that. If you type in Glazier and Caspico, you'll probably find that, or I can send you the link, Scott. And yeah, I really have fun with it. I feel like I'm really, really good at that. And anybody who ever needs help can always reach out to me with a bad review, and I'll help you draft the response.
You're a fountain of knowledge, my friend.
Who knew? Like I said, I didn't even know what marketing was. I became kind of good at it. Like it's kind of that's funny, I no idea that that's all marketing.
All right, a couple more. My third one is I know you become increasingly involved in organized optometry. I know you're now on the AOA's Evidence Based Optometry Committee. What's your message to the audience about getting involved?
One of the most important things you can do for your practice and your profession is to get involved in your state and local association, and drive the different efforts and legislation and fundraising that help optometry advance as a profession, because a static profession is a dying profession. And we need to keep pushing the envelope. We need to keep moving forward, we need to make sure that our colleagues in every state can practice to the full scope of their education, or we have dropped the ball. There's plenty of ODs out there, plenty of us who ride the coattails of other OD volunteers who take time away from their families and their practices to fight for everyone. And listen, not everybody is somebody who gets involved that way. So there's other things you can do. If you're not a organization person, write a check. If you're not a writer, be an organization person. But ideally, hopefully, we all can do both to some degree, because this profession really, really needs to boost itself. And the way it does that is by increasing its membership. If you're not a membership of the AOA, please consider becoming a member. If you're not a member of your state association, that's a good place to start getting involved. And we really need everyone's help to grow and continue to thrive in our careers. Listen, you're going to be, you can get on committees where you're working on getting different coding through Medicare that literally comes back directly to your practice, and you profit from that. And there's several other areas that your work can directly benefit your business. And maybe that's not what motivates you, and that's great, but you can do it either way. So that's kind of my soapbox. It's longer than that, but I'm going to stop right there.
Well said. Lastly, what's going to challenge optometry in the next 5 or 10 years? This is big thinking time. What is going to be the challenge? What do you think we need to start thinking about today, if we haven't already?
Our biggest challenge in my opinion, is the same challenge that's been for a while now, and that's vision plan and the declining or static reimbursement, where we're earning less and less as inflate. Even if your dollar number isn't going down, we're earning less and less based on inflation, with it not going up at all. I saw an ad on TV. The company will go unnamed, but it was an owl in the ad, and it said something to the effect that $55, get a glasses and a free eye exam. That exam is worth $55. And this is blasted out to the world. I mean, talk about cheapening the value of an eye exam. For me, that is the biggest threat is companies that, listen, it's a competitive marketplace. Everybody's going to compete every way they can. I don't take that away from them, but we have to also be good at getting the message out of the value we bring, so that people don't devalue us. And we can't have low self-esteem. I call it OLSI, optometric low self-esteem, where we just say yes to any plan that comes around because it puts a butt in the chair. You may be losing money on that patient if your chair costs are higher than your reimbursement. So that's really the biggest thing. And then again, the other big thing is the standards that optometry schools are that are changing based on board passing rates and things, and bringing people into schools, because so many schools and less applicants. That's another big challenge that can severely lower the quality of our profession. And I think those two things are the biggest challenges.
I'll tell you, I had my 2024 physical, bunch of lab work done, all in the auspice of keeping me here for a lot of years. I think that the total build amount for the physical was $1,800. I think the labs were another 600. It's hard, right? This healthcare nut that we have grown in the U.S. is not an easy one to crack. But in optometry, standing up for what you believe is right for the value you give to your patient is really important. And when we don't do that, we just do things under the guise of we're going to get more people to see, to examine. It's a failure on our behalf. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, 100%.
Alan, I'm going to give you the last word. I didn't prepare you for this. What's something that almost no one in the audience would know about you?
Oh my God, I'm going to totally flub this. Something I've saved two people's lives physically, like outside of optometry. I saved someone. I pushed them out of the way of a car that was going to crush them, and I saved my friend's life with a Heimlich. Yeah, yeah, that was pretty cool. Um,
That's there's nothing more valuable than that.
right?
Uh,
Nobody would know that. I can't. There's probably a bunch of other stuff, stuff I'd share, stuff I wouldn't. But on that, on the cusp of the moment, that's the one I throw out to anyone that asks.
and the actual final parting shot, your message to your colleagues. What do you got?
Um, I just I would want to tell everybody that how much I appreciate you, and how much I relish the opportunity to lead this community, and how hard I work to keep things real there. Not everybody agrees with everything I do, and I'm okay with that. And for the most part, 99% of people are on board and understand how it works. And I just hope you get as much value as you can. And I plan on continuing to follow that original mission to have a high quality conversation and be transparent moving forward. And if there's anything I can do that adds value to any of your personal or professional lives, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me.
More high quality conversations. That's what we need in all aspects of life.
Thanks. Thank you, Scott. And thank you.
Dr. Alan Glazier,
I
thank you for your
appreciate you,
time
Scott.
today. Appreciate your incredible stories. I really do.
Thank you. And I appreciate you, everything you've brought to the industry as well, and continue to bring through this and other efforts you're involved in. So thank you for the honor of being able to present on here.
My pleasure. And to the audience, thanks for attending. Until my next Sandbox story, be great at all you do.